You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Spartans. And before going any further, John, can you hear me right now? Is this working right now?
I can, loud and clear. I got my speakers going in the office. Everything sounds beautiful.
Okay, for a peek behind the curtain, it is turning water into wine down here. This call being completed even jumps that in the echelon of miracles because this was supposed to happen last week. Horrible Wi-Fi issues on my end, but finally, he is here. John Garcia Jr., Director of Football Recruiting for Sports Illustrated. Now I'll just ask you, how you doing, man? You doing okay over there?
I'm doing well. A lot of craziness in the world of recruiting, but that's what makes it fun. We definitely don't have any kind of off season, so I'm thankful for it, although it definitely keeps me busy.
I don't envy you at all. And listen, I talk college sports too, but I just, talk about one team primarily. And even that's hard to keep track of sometimes. You do it all. Recruiting, transfers, anything. So it's been wild. You have a wide palette of everything going on in the nation. But let's start in East Lansing. Mel Tucker heading into year 3 in East Lansing. And sometimes we get stuck in a vacuum. Sometimes this whole Tuck coming, the hype around him. I love him like a family member. But maybe we need to step back. As an objective national guy like yourself, how would you sum up the Mel Tucker era so far? Are you going to keep inflating our collective ego, or are you going to bring us back down to earth, John? Talk to us.
Probably the former. I mean, look, everything has been a sign of hitting the ground running in East Lansing for Mel Tucker, whether it's on the field, whether it's recruiting. Now you throw in the transfer portal, big upsets, big marquee wins. I mean, he's checked almost every single box that one could have expected in a short amount of time. And I think that's pushing the program forward. I think there is a sense of stability. I think there is still a sense of rise that is potentially ahead for Michigan State. It's a program that is set up for success. And the hard part was already accomplished. The hard part is having the breakout season and getting some marquee wins, some upsets on the field. Once you do that, everything trickles down from there. It will filter into recruiting. The success in the portal last year will lead to more success. And I know we'll talk about this incoming transfer class that's really strong, and so on and so forth. I think the footprint of where Michigan State is looking for talent has only expanded under Mel Tucker, which is probably one of the key elements to sustain success. They're making plays. They're making plays for kids down here in my home state of Florida. I see them all the time in Georgia. They're in the South in general, as well as, emphasizing that Midwestern Big Ten footprint. So it's a nice balance. And again, you throw in the portal and I only see more sustainability going forward, which really in this day and age, that's really what you want as a fan of college football, of one team. You want to see sustainability because it means you're going to remain relevant. You're going to factor into games. You're going to factor into conference titles, which will in turn help you factor into recruiting.
And so you obviously are very plugged in with recruiting, so you would know more than I have because I've been asked this question, like, why? Why has this been on such an uprise here for Michigan State recruiting? Because right now we're looking pretty good. Last year's class, okay, not bad. I think top 20, if not just outside top 20. This year, or for the 2023 class, starting to look pretty good. Why is that? Is it the footprint that they're looking in? Is it these wins that they've collected? Is it the coaching hires like guys like Brandon Jordan, Marco Coleman on the defensive side? Is it just simply more marketing? They're more just present on social media. What is the biggest factor to you in the mind of some of these highly rated recruits that are looking at Michigan State now?
I think it is that stability. It's a sense that Michigan State is no longer kind of a niche program. We talk about a lot of specific programs that have had on-field success, but it doesn't necessarily translate off the field. Does it feel like it's more of a niche thing? Is it viewed more perceptionally as a flash in the pan where it's like, well, you had a great year, but we kind of don't think it's going to stay that way.
Gotcha.
With Michigan State, it feels totally different. It feels like this is the beginning of what should be a long tenure for Mel Tucker in East Lansing. That alone, that stability is something that literally 2/3 of the Power Five can't sell. Either they've already rebranded coaching staffs in the last year, 18 months, or they're about to do that after this year. So for the 1/3 that isn't in that group, it really feels different. It feels like you're competing with a smaller, more intimate group of blue bloods and schools thereafter. And I think Michigan State is right kind of on that bubble. And that sustainability creates a perception in recruiting that leads to, shockingly, more sustainability in terms of plucking talent. Michigan State, when kids get that offer, they're excited about it. And they tell me that it's something with staying power. It's not something that is fun for a couple of hours. It's something that they'll come back to. They'll look into, visiting East Lansing. And you look at some of the recruits they've gotten on campus outside of their natural region and footprint. And that continues to illustrate that point that Michigan State's offer is holding a lot of weight, which is another big step on the trail.
That is a dynamite segue. That was almost scripted by you right there. You are a pros pro because, listen, they get the offer. They tweet it out. It's cool. But now, like, these highly rated kids are starting to act on it. Okay, so this is reported from 24/7 Sports, or SpartanTailgate.com, rather, that we have, these are all 5-star kids that are planning to visit, if not have already visited East Lansing. We got defensive lineman Vic Burley. We have defensive lineman David Hicks. We have offensive lineman Francis Maui Goa. We have offensive lineman Samson Okunlola. We have running back Ruben Owens. Again, some of those kids have already been on campus. Some are planning on visiting this summer. It's awesome to have them on campus, but, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter unless you get them to sign. Point blank, can Michigan State fans like me expect to get one of these kids, or is this a little too early in the whole Mel Tucker era to expect 5-stars to actually sign that dotted line on signing day?
Yeah, I don't think it's early in his era to start expecting blue chip recruits, but in terms of this cycle, with some of those guys you named in particular, I do think it's a little bit early. I know Francis, Okunlola, Ruben Owens, those guys are all taking their time with the process. But there's another thing that those guys have in common that you all named. None of them live in Michigan. None of them live in Ohio. Right. None of them live in Indiana. None of them live in that traditional Big Ten footprint in the Midwest. So, again, these are Texans. These are Floridians. Okunlola's from Boston. These are players well outside of the traditional footprint. And to be in the game for them says a lot. I look at a kid like Ruben Owens in particular, the running back from Texas. He's got this top 5 that he established before the new year. And it really hasn't changed. It's been Texas, Texas A&M, Alabama, USC, and the national champs, Georgia. That's been his group. Yet one of his most recent visits was a multi-day trip up to East Lansing. So not only are you contending for kids who are yet to form some of those conclusions and begin to narrow down the process, but now you're getting kids to visit when they thought you were kind of done with them. They thought, the relationship had kind of faded, but you're staying in the hunt thereafter. So I think some of that stick-to-itiveness that Mel Tucker and his staff has shown resonates with kids. A lot of these kids are smart. I know they're teenagers, 16, 17, 18. I know kids who will put out a top group just to see if one of the schools outside of that group is going to reach out, or are they going to bow out and just like your Twitter post, and that's kind of it. So I know with Ruben Owens in particular, that's something he really liked about Michigan State. They have stayed on him despite not being in any kind of top group projection or prediction for his recruitment. And they were rewarded with the visit, which is always, the next step in actually, bringing in some of this talent.
And maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like every year there's like this avalanche of commits, right? Like, sure, you get commits throughout the offseason, even the regular season. But then, like, out of nowhere, there's like a 2-3 week stretch where it's like, oh my God, 80% of the board's gone right now. Like, do you expect that season to start anytime soon, or when do you expect like this rush of commits to happen? Or am I wrong? Am I wrong in thinking that that's like a trend that happens in college?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, typically this time of year, it's about spring football, right? The coaches are on the road evaluating. Most high schools in the South, certainly some of these kids we've talked about, are playing spring ball and or running track at their respective schools. So there's not a whole lot of visits going down right now. But once that calendar flips to June, the prospect camps begin, the unofficial visits and official visits continue across the country. And I do think that is where you will start to see some tangible action, not only for Michigan State, but for basically every single program, because kids will be able to perform and update that evaluation for coaches, and they can reciprocate with either a scholarship offer or the green light on a previous scholarship offer to push the kid towards making a decision, right now to stay in the city that they're competing in. So it is that time of year where it's going to begin to ramp up quite a bit. And then you couple that with the fact that most of these elite kids want to make a decision before their senior season begins. So between June and August, we do see a little bit of a recruiting spike in general, just within the industry, because kids are either earning that big offer they've been waiting on, or they get the green light for that school that has been interested for a while, or they really want to get this thing done so they could focus on having a great, all-encompassing senior season where their high school teammates have their entire focus.
Bang. Look at that. Okay, well, I'll stay tuned. And until then, we'll actually switch the topic of conversation to not kids going to college soon, but kids already in college. Want to pick your brain about the transfer portal, all that fun stuff. But first, I got to preach to the fine folks about some Buildbar. That's right, Buildbar. You've heard us talk about Buildbar forever, really as long as you've been listening to this podcast, and for three good reasons. One, first and foremost, they taste outstanding. They are better than any candy bar you've ever had. They are wrapped in 100% real chocolate. They're soft. They're chewy. They taste like what's actually on the wrapper. This is not your father's protein bar where you're just biting into it and it tastes like you're eating chalk and you're just trying to convince yourself that you're eating like Blueberry Bountiful Blast or whatever the hell it's called. Number two, they take care of your body. I've gone 3 weeks without working out until yesterday. I had a Built Bar before the workout, and thanks to Built Bar, it's the reason I'm still here today. Otherwise, it would have gone horrible for me. Each Built Bar contains about 170 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, just 4 grams of net carbs, but a whopping 17 grams of protein to not just get you through a workout, but also day doing yard work, day at the golf course, day at the in-laws, day at the office, whatever you need. They got you taken care of. They also got your wallet taken care of. Go to built.com, smash in promo code LOCKED15. It's going to save you 15% off your order. One more time, built.com, promo code LOCKED15. Save 15% off of your Built Bar order. And before welcoming the wonderful John Garcia Jr., yes, Director of Football Recruiting for Sports Illustrated, I just want to thank you for making Locked On Spartans your first listen every single day. John, surprise, surprise, busy transfer portal season for the third straight offseason for Mel Tucker and company. I'll just make it as broad of a question as possible. Which incoming player has really caught your eye the most as far as just name or position, or just take it away? You know what? You're the better one talking. Hog the mic for me, please.
When he first announced his commitment to transfer to Michigan State, Jalen Berger, that's the one that caught me just casually, right? Where I wasn't even like looking into it. I wasn't really tracking his recruitment. Certainly an interconference transfer at that position from that school, and in Madison to this one, where they both have pretty strong running back legacies, and it's been updated in the last couple of years. That certainly caught my attention in the hopes of seeing what it looks like post Kenneth Walker, what that backfield looks like. And then, of course, they bring in another commitment at the position to counter Berger. I think Berger's, big, physical, downhill, one cut, run behind his pads kind of guy. But you think of the kid coming from Colorado, Broussard, and it's your thunder to the lightning, or your lightning to the thunder, I should say. A little bit more gadgety, quicker than fast. But, he can play in between the tackles as well. He's got a bit of a nose for the end zone, for that first down marker, but certainly smaller in stature and a little bit more comfortable in space than Berger. So we could see a bit of an evolution and a potential shared workload for Michigan State. And why not? If the transfer portal works so well with Walker, why not go to it and maybe put these two together to put something together in 2021. So I like the running back addition, overhaul, whatever we want to call it. Those caught my attention just because of the success that we just saw. But in taking a deeper look at what Michigan State has coming in, I really like these linebackers. Very familiar with Aaron Brule down here in SEC, ACC country. Covered him in high school, certainly saw him at Mississippi State. Just a striker, a downhill type of linebacker with some pass rushing upside. One of the more successful pass rushing linebackers when he moved out to the edge. Really smart, instinctive kid who plays within his means. He's very much within his frame. The technique looks good when he's approaching blockers. He's excellent coming off of the block. He tackles with strong technique. Not the most twitchy guy in terms of athleticism, but he can rush the passer and get some things done for you. And then you watch anything on Windman from UNLV and you get excited. Hadn't been, overly connected to watching him prior. But this is a twitchy linebacker who is very comfortable both in space and rushing the passer. And I think, again, you talk about that versatility. Not only is it going to keep you on the field as a linebacker, but it's going to help you emphasize a strength. Michigan State was, I believe, top 10 in sacks in 2021, and you lost a lot of that production. So you need to try to manufacture more of it wherever you can. So, yes, you brought in D linemen. I think Chris Bogle has a lot of talent on the edge, but these linebackers as pass rushers, that really piques my interest when you're talking about, playing in space and keeping guys on the field with considerable big-time experience. I think both of those pairs at running back and linebacker are four names that Michigan State Spartan fans should keep a very close eye on, because I think all of them are going to make an impact.
No doubt. And I'm jazzed as anyone about the linebackers, but there's someone else on the defense too that I'm thrilled about. And I want you to either check me or further keep me going here, because just like Chris Bogle, SEC guy, can we expect a big year out of him? Because listen, former top 70 recruit. It's got all the intangibles, got a great frame. And also when you pair it with, and maybe I'm falling too much in love with this new coaching hire in Brandon Jordan and Marco Coleman, but like you pair that coaching with that kind of an athlete with that pedigree, like I'm really expecting a big year from Bogle. Now, you may have watched him a little more than we have, or maybe know more about him. Should I take a step back and be a little more patient on this, or am I in the right to be like all aboard the Chris Bogle train going into this season?
Look, the talent is there. I mean, it's
Okay.
been there. You mentioned top 100 recruit. I saw him aplenty at Cardinal Gibbons High School in Fort Lauderdale, helped them to a state championship. This is a kid who was a freak off the edge, kind of that conventional edge, right? When you think of the evolution of pass rushing, your old school defensive ends in that 4-3 are now more stand-up edge rushers. You make them like Chris Bogle, 6'4", 6'5". He's probably 250 or so right now. He was always lighter, though. He was always this kind of tall, stringy looking prospect. So now that he's put on some weight, he does have that SEC experience that you mentioned. I do think there's a lot in front of him in terms of his game. His best football is certainly well ahead. Obviously curious to see how he adjusts towards that new coaching staff. But in terms of just length, twitch, and those natural gifts that make you a great pass rusher, Chris Bogle has had that for 5 years. It's just a matter of him putting it all together. And look, for some elite players, it's about getting a fresh start. If it doesn't go the way you thought it would go, and I think Bogle would tell you it didn't at Florida, I would tell you it didn't at Florida. Florida would probably tell you it didn't go how they thought. Sometimes everybody just needs to hit the reset button, and going to a place that does have a reinvested in coaching staff dedicated to pass rushers. That's really the biggest thing for him. He needs to polish up and pair some of that natural athleticism with more technique, a diversified pass rush tool set. I'm not sure how far along on that quest he is, but again, the talent is there. Even if you use them situationally, which we've seen a lot of schools do with success, I do think there's a lot of value there. If he's singled up against the tackle and that speed rush is available, there's not a lot of players in America that can get there quicker than Bogle can. So it's a matter of him developing that and then developing some counters off of that to keep offensive tackles honest when they do have to line up and block them.
All right, so I'll change my number from 26 this season to just 19.5.
There you go. Exactly. Temper expectations.
I'll be reasonable here, okay? I'm not going to get too crazy on my end. Would love to fly around the rest of the Big Ten with you because, again, hey, Locked On Spartans, we're in a vacuum. We're talking Michigan State, but when we got a national guy like you on, it might be nice to open up the window and see what on earth is going on in the rest of the conference. That might be nice for us to stay in tune with the rest of the Big Ten. But first, John, I'm sorry, I got to kick you to the bench again because I got to talk to the lovely people about BetOnline.net. That's right. It is the best time of year. It's warm outside. There's sports going on, but not just sports. We're talking playoffs. We're talking NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs. Probably no playoffs for the Tigers in October, but hey, until then, you can still wager on them at betonline.net. They are your number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures at BetOnline. That's right, your continued source for all your sports wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends in action. That's at BetOnline, where the game starts. John, you're back. This is incredible. You stuck around for all three segments and that the Wi-Fi has stayed in touch. There we go. What a blessing. let's wrap up this show here with Bebopping around the Big Ten. I'll ask you just the most boring, broad question of all time. Which other program in the Big Ten has impressed you the most in the transfer portal here?
I think Michigan State is the best portal class in the
Let's
Big
go.
Ten. I think Nebraska's close. I think Nebraska's got more volume, certainly. And when you bring in two quarterbacks, look, it's going to draw eyeballs. And certainly, Purdy and Thompson coming in drew my eyeballs as well, because you just don't see schools bringing in multiple quarterbacks. But I did think that they supplemented it with some nice players. I really like Trey Palmer, the wide receiver from LSU. O'Shawn Mathis coming from TCU was a huge upset victory over Texas on the portal trail, if that makes sense. He's a pass rusher. Nebraska, was pretty solid on defense. So reemphasizing some of those points makes a lot of sense. I also like the corner they brought in, big corner, Tommy Hill from Arizona State, has wide receiver experience as well. So maybe he could flip over and play on offense to help that struggling side of the ball a little bit more. But I thought Nebraska was really balanced. I thought they brought in a variety of players. They hit the trenches as well. And you could see a lot of impact guys here. And what feels like, is this the last chance for Scott Frost? I'm not sure. But it feels like this is it. So I do think that he's got all his chips in to try to right this ship over in Lincoln. And he's brought in some instant impact guys, regardless of who wins that quarterback battle. That will be the headliner, but there is some depth beyond.
Now, on the flip side, let's just talk misery for Big Ten. Like, is there any program out there it's like, oh my God, they really got hammered hard in the transfer portal, either by way of losing kids in the transfer portal or just not winning some of these battles against other teams and kind of having a drier transfer portal season than they would have liked? Is there any one or two or 13 programs that stick out to you? For
13 was the key number. Look, Ohio State lost a bunch of guys, and I think they were expecting to lose some. But that kind of defensive back exodus that they saw, I think will really hurt them depth-wise. They have talent, obviously, and they brought in some great high school talent in the secondary, but they're going to have to rely on some of those young guys, which is a little bit puzzling for a preseason, Big Ten champion type of program. So losing more than you gained isn't a deal breaker in the perception department, but when it's all at one position like that, it kind of draws your ire a little bit. So curious to see how the Bucks bounce back in the secondary. And then Maryland had a lot of names leave as well. Just a lot of volume and scholarship players exiting that roster. I mean, Damian Robinson's one of the top, twitchiest pass rushers in the country. So him leaving for an interconference program in Penn State hurts. They did combat it a little bit in adding some players. I think Vandarius Cowan's going to be an impact front seven guy. He's a big physical linebacker who could rush the passer a little bit. And I think, we'll see how that works defensively under Mike Locksley. But I thought the exodus is at those two schools in particular were really noteworthy. And then, in scouring the Big Ten, some programs just kind of sit out. You don't see a whole lot of activity with Michigan. You don't see a whole lot of activity with Iowa. Some of these programs really just kind of sit still and kind of let the chips fall where they may. And I respect them for it. But, I do lean towards adjusting to the current times and dipping your toes into that portal, because it's something that's going to factor into all these conferences, how they stack up, eventually the playoff, maybe even the championship game itself one day. The programs that have boosted their roster, to the highest degree are usually the ones that are still contending when the weather gets very, very cold. Although for me, being from Florida, September and East Lansing is probably at that limit for me.
Or if you're a complete wuss like me that has lived in Michigan his whole life, even September is when it starts to get a little cold for me as well. That's a shame about Ohio State. I'm sick to my stomach. They can never catch a break down there in Columbus. Sure. So it's horrible. Let me see if I can phrase this final question correctly. And if not, then I'm sorry. But speaking of other Big Ten East teams, and I'm sorry to Rutgers and Maryland, I'm just going to focus on Penn State and Michigan right now. What's more likely, that Penn State takes a step up from last season? And it's not to say that they had a horrible season. Or is it more likely that U of M takes a big step down next season? Between those two, who's going to be on a bigger elevator ride going which way or another?
I think relative to making the playoff, it would be hard to not pick Michigan.
Big ask,
Right. With that question, I think Penn State is going to contend. They return a lot of talent. Certainly, they'll feel similar on offense, and that defense might be better this fall. So I'm curious to see how they look. But with Michigan, to sustain that, with what they lost on defense, I'm just not sure. When you lose
Sure.
2 top 50 picks on the edge, you lose a first round safety, just those 3 spots in general, I think that leaves a lot to be desired. I think they'll have to reshuffle the deck there on defense. And offensively, I'm still not convinced. I think this quarterback shuffle deal that Jim Harbaugh has going on is good in terms of winning 9 or 10 games. And that's great. But look, I'm from a national standpoint. For me, it's about conference titles, the playoff.
Yeah.
It's about hardware. And I'm not sure that is a formula for success in the hardware department. I don't know off the top of my head. I can't think of a quarterback rotation that ended with a championship like what they do. Tim Tebow, Chris Leak. I mean, that might be dating myself a little bit.
Right.
But it just doesn't happen is my point. And I don't see it happening in this day and age. And it makes you wonder, how Jim Harbaugh, how Jim Harbaugh negotiates between his quarterbacks and particularly JJ McCarthy, which we all could agree is the more talented option. How he manipulates that system and delegates, I'm not sure how big of an impact that will have, not only on this year's Michigan team, but potentially Michigan teams in years to come, because there's a lot of eligibility in that quarterback room right now. So I'm very curious to see how that goes, but I do not expect a return to the playoffs. So kind of by default, I'll say Michigan slides more than Penn State rises.
Yeah, it would be a shame if that fractures their locker room and puts them in years of dismay for years, decades to come. You would just hate to see that completely over here. So, John, this has been great. I know we're coming up on time right now. Cannot thank you enough for preaching your knowledge, not just on what you're seeing from the outside at Michigan State, but also the whole Big Ten as a whole. Where can the lovely folks of Locked On Spartans Nation find you on the internet to either yell at you or sing your praises? Where can they find you, man?
Yes, please bring it on. Real simple. si.com/college is our hub for all of our football, basketball, and recruiting content right in one spot, all free for the most part. And I'm on Twitter as well, John Garcia _JR, same handle for all other social media as well.
Love that. Awesome. Well, John, this was great. Glad we finally got to talk with no interruption. This is great. So, hey, talk to you probably at some point again this offseason. We'll see how busy things get in East Lansing here. So until then, take it easy, man. Enjoy your weekend.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.